you tired of the daily hustle and bustle, the endless traffic just to get your little one to a good school? GMS Snap Bingo offers a unique blend of academic excellence with a holistic child development in both nursery and primary. We provide a national curriculum with an international touch. Enroll your child today by visiting our campus along Trinity College, Dabigo Road. GMS Snap Bingo, where every child's potential is a reality. Because we care.
This is Second Take with IDK, with a man who knows a thing or two about sport and so many other things. Isma Dakabachigongo, welcome to your own show. And my name is Mabel Kebirungi. I have the awesome privilege of working alongside Isma, a man, I tell people, I've actually known you for very long. Yeah, I think we shouldn't count because people, for all the people who say I look, you know, they are surprised about some of the things I say because they think I wouldn't know that because I'm younger. Thank you very much. All I can say is I drink lots of water, and maybe I won't be saying too much to give my age away. But Isma, how much water do you drink? How are you, and how much water do you drink on a daily?
I'm very good. I'm very inconsistent with the water. There are days when I'm able to take close to 3 liters, and then there are days when I remember to take the water when I get home late in the evening or in the night. So very inconsistent. I do not have an average of that. I'm also very good with telling people that you're much younger, but very resourceful. But I've also met many people who watch the show who would love to meet Mabel as a person. Many gentlemen who would love to meet her. And
I wouldn't mind meeting them as well.
On that, I'm always very protective of you. So I don't know whether that's what you'd want, but I've learned that's not what you want. So a few of you will get a chance to meet Mabel one of these days.
Okay. There's a message here from Ladslaus, I think, Mudingoto. He's asking, you know, I love the show, but when are you talking about the London Marathon? I think we did mention the London Marathon. It's happening later. Is it this month?
April 26th.
Yeah, so we'll talk about it then.
Yeah, I've had the date wrapped up in my mind.
Yeah.
And I've told everyone on this show that on April 26th, that Sunday morning, if you live in Uganda or anywhere you are in the world, make sure you watch this one. I have a very strong feeling that Jacob Kiplimo might win it.
And break any records?
Very, very strong
while
feeling.
Winning it?
Maybe not, but winning it will be sufficient. Will be one of the blockbuster athletics events of the year, considering that last year's winner, Sebastian Sawe, is in it. For Ugandan interest, Jacob Kiplimo is in it. Finished second last year in the London Marathon and also won the Chicago Marathon at the end of the year. Then Joshua Cheptegei will also be running in it. But I've insisted, and I need to check out a bit of the competition and the form going into the event on April 26th. And then I'll make a very decisive remark on who is going to win it. But I've also learned that during this period, over the past few years, I've learned that it's very difficult to find Joshua Cheptegei or Jacob Kiplimo. They are locked in a box when they have a big event. They barely touch their phones for 2 months. And all I've seen that has been released is clips of them training and running in the hills of Boko and Kapchora. So I can imagine how locked in they are.
They take discipline to another level.
Yeah.
Really.
Amazing. Amazing what they are able to do. I remember in 2020, I was in Mbale for a funeral of a parent to one of my friends. And that friend of mine has a brother who is one of the managers of Joshua Cheptegei. That's before the Tokyo Olympics were cancelled. I remember looking at Joshua Cheptegei and touching his skin. It was gray. It was pale. He had no slice of fat or meat on him because he was preparing for the Olympics. And I remember telling him at the time that if the Olympics came tomorrow and you do not break the 10,000 meter and 5K world record, the world should never forgive you for it. We should all punish you for it. Eventually, the Olympics were called off because of COVID, because of a pandemic. And I thought he missed a grand opportunity that year, but he would go on later that year to lower many records because that's the time when he traveled to Monaco and broke a record That's a time when President Museveni gave him a private jet, hired him a private jet to fly him out of Entebbe when the airport was closed to France for one of his events. That's how privileged he has been. But there are times when I've looked at him and his skin shows the strain of someone chasing a very big goal. A bit like some of my friends in the diaspora who always tell me there are times when they work anywhere between 16 to 18 hours. And I'm always thinking, if I had to sit at the job for that long.
In winter.
Yeah, it can be that difficult. And I've met Joshua, and sometimes I've felt this is a strain to get to the kind of heights you've got and the money. Yeah, but it's April 26th, and when it gets closer, I'll come here and give you a lowdown on how the shape of the Ugandans is, the competition, the conditions, and what will eventually decide, and hopefully also predict who the winner will be. And for now, I'm very biased. I think Jacob Kiplimo will win the London Marathon. I have a strong feeling he will.
Jacob Kiplimo. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, we have to talk about AFCON, because every day there's something new. I actually even saw, I think the permanent secretary. No, I saw a gentleman this time.
He's called Dr. Dennis Mujimba.
Yes.
He's the spokesperson for the Ministry of Education and Sports.
Yes.
And also the spokesperson for the local organizing committee of the AFCON for Uganda.
Can I read a message here from Mwalakida Charles? He says,
Please do.
Communication mishaps,
Yeah.
sorry, mishaps are common. Even during the Chan tournament, they were there. The ministry spokesperson took over and briefing was happening from the Uganda Media Center, and that left out the sports journalists so that they get their notifications concerning football issues from Ahmed. Anyway, he says, I think for AFCON, the tournament spokesperson should at least be deputized by someone from the federation, from the FA. I wonder how active those committees set up by AFCON are.
I think they are. This past week, I had the chance to meet Dennis, or like people in his office call him Dr. Dennis Mujimba for the first time. I was invited to Radio 1 Spectrum, and he was the other guest on the other side. And I remember the first thing I told him, you'll forgive me for the salutations. I'm not very good with saluting with Mr. and Doctor and all these other titles. Some of it is very inflated, and I'm just not used to it, because the references we make to people who are more famous and more popular than some of these titles are like Lionel Messi and Cristiano Ronaldo and all the others. We never need to call them Mr. It actually reminds me of the time I worked in the Ministry of Education and Sports, and I remember always referring to then Sports Minister Hamson Oboa as Hamson. And many people around the ministry were offended, because in the civil service they are used to these Mr. Honorable and
But
all.
maybe because you're about the same age.
Not exactly the same age.
Would you have called who was there before him? The Minister of Sports. I can see his face.
Who's that? Bakabulindi?
Yes, Bakabulindi. Would you
Actually,
call him Charles?
I used to call him Bakabulindi, not Charles, but without the Mr. I had a lot of time with him, and we had things we disagreed on, many of them, in the time with guy, but I was just used to that. And I remember when someone else tried to call him Hamson, I remember telling him that, Hamson telling him that only Ismail is allowed to do that. But also had the privilege that while I was a young boy working at Radio 1, and I used to do the Radio 1 locker room every Saturday from 1 to 3, Hamson Oboa, while he was still Youth MP, drove his car and came to Radio 1 to speak to me, because he thought I'd done a fantastic job. So I walk out of studio and I'm told there's someone waiting for you.
An MP.
Yeah, someone waiting. Actually, the person told me he did not even know that he was an MP, because he does not carry a lot of airs around him. He's relatively humble. Without the sirens, if you met him, you wouldn't know that he's actually the minister, government chief whip currently. So, and he came and said, we need to keep the conversation going. And of course, maybe eventually with him, we lived in the same neighborhood, and the conversation was stretched to so many things. Yeah, so maybe the salutations died with that. familiarity breeds contempt, like they say. So in the case of this, I think we need to get more familiar with these committees because there are 13 of them. But the most important, and I don't know whether someone was watching this, I remember when we did Second Take with IDK the last time, I spoke about the need for there to be consistent communication channel. Because in the previous week, there had been all this fight that had the minister, Peter Gwang, say things that I thought he said in a very angry tone, and I'll repeat that, and I've shared with him privately, that I felt they should not be speaking the way they were. And then FUFA let one of their lieutenants respond to him in Patrick Entege.
Yeah.
I felt there was no need for that. Yes, we had all seen the CAF report. Uganda was shot. And actually, I think it would have been foolhardy for any of us to think that the CAF report would come out almost a year to the AFCON and give Uganda 100% that we're ready. There was never a chance of that happening. So they cited things that we should be doing. And I hope those things are being done. So this week, Dennis, who is the head of the spokesperson of the LOC, came out to put out some of the fire. And I remember when I was with him at Radio 1, I told him that one of the things I had during that period when we were together on air, he was in the wrong profession, because he spoke a bit with the comfort that a surgeon gives you when they are going to remove your heart and that kind of transplant. They tell you, we're only going to remove this and place it here and then put another heart, and in 10 minutes you'll be walking. The reality is, patients of heart transplants take much longer, because I thought the manner in which he carried himself and spoke about what Uganda is doing in light of preparing for the AFCON was very, very, very reassuring. That's why I thought he was in the wrong job, because sometimes many of us who have these platforms can get away with murder. Actually, there's a famous quote that I've seen from, and I want to get into some of the numbers. I'm going to tell you some of the numbers that he made in that press conference. There's a famous quote that my former colleague and friend, Daniel Kalinachi, always used as a sign-off when he sent you email. I hope I have it somewhere, because I always laughed when I saw it. Yeah. So his sign-off was always this: if a person is not talented enough to be a novelist, not smart enough to be a lawyer, and his hands are too shaky to perform operations, he becomes a journalist. So when I saw Dennis speak and the comfort with the language and to give the reassurance like journalists would, my mind ran to that, because I remember Kalinachi would always use it very often. So what was his task? He came out, first of all, to allay the fears that the CAF report said Uganda was not just ready, but the CAF report was a bit of advisory on what Uganda would be doing.
Yeah.
And then thereafter, he revealed that government has allocated as much or as little as 905 billion shillings to sort out many of the things that are supposed to be done. And here is a breakdown of the things that he mentioned. Sometimes we journalists are also not very good with numbers. We are very good with many things, but the moment you throw numbers at us, it can be quite a task. The first is that there's going to be 213.76 billion spent on roads. There is 184.9 billion to be spent on building a passenger terminal at the Kabalega International Airport. Remember, it was initially built for cargo only, to support the oil sector there. Then there is 109.9 billion shillings allocated to the activities of the local organizing committee. Wherever I think they go with their inspections, their meetings and all, for them to prepare for this tournament. I also know for a fact that initially there was no money allocated here for the LOC. It actually took a phone call from the CAF president, Patrice Motsepe, to President Museveni. for this money to be allocated because it wasn't. That's why I said here on the show the other day that anything that is being said about the AFCON, we have got to a point where if you're not listening to either Mosepe or Museveni, everyone else is a low-hanging fruit. We all do not know what is happening. I know this money was allocated after a phone call. Then, one of my bigger worries has always been the hotels. Yes. For this, government has allocated 101 billion shillings to hotels in Hoima and Masindi. Most of them are either 2 or 3 star and should be upgraded to 5-star facilities. And the Hoteliers Association of that region has actually come together to identify the hotels where the money should be invested for them to be upgraded to 5-star facilities.
Is it something that is sustainable after this? 5-star hotels in Hoima?
We'll get to that. But it's also a good thing that we first get them there. I think when the area has the airport now and the hotels, then it will probably become sustainable over a period of time. So this money has been put in Uganda Development Bank and Uganda Development Corporation, and the hotels there are going to be supported. Those can be upgraded from 3-star to 5-star, 2-star to 3-star, because CAF wants 5-star for their teams and the officials, but they also think fans who can afford should stay in 3-star hotels. So that's part of the task. Then there is hospitals. There is one in Hoima, there is one in Masindi, and there is a health center 3 that is going to be upgraded to a hospital. Those have been allocated 91 billion shillings through the Ministry of Health to do that work. In a
year's time?
Yeah. To upgrade those hospitals and then also put in place an ICU unit.
Yeah.
My bigger worry with this is that it's a very good thing, first of all, because the hospitals are not going built for the AFCON and not only going to be used by the players, because what CAF is often looking at is also the fans who will come there. So when a fan has an issue, they'll be treated, but also in the aftermath of the AFCON, these hotels will be there to serve the communities. Yeah. For me, my only issue with this is that over the past few years, there have been a lot of challenges with the Ministry of Health and hiring human resource. If we have an ICU bed, let's say we have 5 of them in Hoima and Masindi, is the ministry able in this short period of time to hire people on the government payroll and be able to pay them for them to run those ICU beds? For me, that's a challenge, because I was reading the most recent Auditor General's report, a story done by the Daily Monitor, and I think the capacity, the staffing levels at Mulago are now at 49%. So there's a lot of staffing gaps in there. So if you have a hospital in Hoima or in Masindi, are we able to put the staff there? Because then they are not a cost on the AFCON, they're a cost on the government. That's the other one. Then there is Nambole. This has been allocated 56.2 billion shillings. That is to upgrade the one we spoke about, the skyboxes, to move the dressing rooms, to move the media tribune and all these kind of things around Nambole to make it a modern stadium, and also expand its capacity from 38,000 to anywhere above 45,000, which would make it eligible to host either the opening ceremony and the opening game or the closing ceremony and the final. Yeah, we would get one of those.
I hope we do.
There is 37.85 billion shillings allocated to marketing the tournament. They're supposed to make the tournament popular, not only with the locals, but I would also imagine with the outside world. I'd love a situation where before the broadcast starts on SuperSport of the AFCON, we show off our heritage. And the marketing for me does not have to be what is going to happen in the stadium.
Not
that Uganda is playing Cameroon. That Uganda is playing Cameroon. What I would want is that this is an opportunity for us to market a lot of the things. I think I've had a chance to travel. And we have more flora and fauna than most of the world. So we need to have these adverts about the gorillas, because we need to create an ecosystem where people visiting Uganda have something else to do on days when there are no games. Yeah, here. Maybe we'll be playing maybe a game every 2 days. So on those days when people are off, let's make them aware of the beauty of Queen Elizabeth, of Makishon Falls, of Kidepo, of the source of the Nile, of the gorillas, and even our food, our heritage. Sometimes when I've had a chance to go to Ndere Center in Intinda, And if you went through the Ndere Center in 2 hours, you may have a summary of Uganda. There are not many countries as culturally diverse as Uganda. With the number of tribes, with the number of languages that we have here, there's got to be a deliberate effort. Even the dressing.
Those cultural evenings where the dancing, I think.
Just as in the Center. So there's a lot of things we can do with this marketing. And I would imagine, because I do not think the people in the AFCON Secretariat are experts at this, this should be the task of the Uganda Tourism Board. Yeah, to do this and put out the kind of content that people coming here also get a chance to see the Baha'i Temple, Namirembe, Rubaga, all these things, Chibuli. Yeah, all these things. They talk about Uganda Kampala is built on 7 hills. If we had a challenge here on set and now behind the camera, where are the 7 hills?
Now they still 7. I thought they even more.
Maybe
but
they
Chibuli,
could be more.
Makere, Namirembe, Rubaga, Mengo. Is it the same?
No, it's not. I don't think it's the same. So just imagine that, yeah? So there has to be a deliberate effort to market, not only the tournament, but the country, because opportunities like this do not just show up. At halftime of games, at the end of the game, some of this money has to be invested there. There's going to be an upgrade of the rail line from town to Nambole through to Namamve.
But it has been working though, but you said an upgrade.
Upgrade. I hope this includes newer wagons because they are spending as much as 23.3 billion shillings on it. I know a colleague of mine who stays in Entebbe and who stays in Chetume and works in Kampala and takes that train on a regular basis. So
it's helpful.
We've not had the magic of mass transport, and the world is proven that the most reliable and consistent means of mass transport is the railway. It's something that we need to concentrate on. That's why I already said that I'm really looking forward to 2028 because government has promised that the rail line they are building from Malaba will be in Kampala in 2028. I hope, hopefully, it will be at the time. Then, there is money that is going to be invested in the Kadiba Stadium that is owned by FUFA. There was a discrepancy in the figures given in the press release. Eventually, Dennis did rectify that and give a clarification. That is 5.5 billion shillings that is being channeled through UPDF to FUFA to upgrade Kadiba and make it a training facility for the tournament. Because remember, UPDF is working on training facilities already. Chambogo, Makerere, Masindi, Hoima, Lira, and several others that are being worked on at this point. Then, there is 13.75 billion shillings that is going to be invested in sanitation. This is in Hoima and Masindi, and also in Chira municipality, where Nambole is. Because I believe many of the people will be staying around that area when the tournament does happen. I hope this is invested in drainages and those kind of things because we are a country where 10 minutes of rain may make you think we've never had a drainage system. The flooding and all. So hopefully that goes into that. Then there is 12.5 billion shillings that is being invested in the preparation of the team. The team that is going to walk out in June of next year. So this goes directly to FUFA. And FUFA have said they are going to entice some of these players in the diaspora and do a bit of a naturalization process to bring these players home to play for Uganda, and hopefully the team will improve through that. So this 12.5 billion shillings is exactly what is more than what actually I remember FUFA had placed in their budget. Initially it was 8 billion. They've been given more. I think not just naturalization of player, but also preparation of the team. Then there is water that is going to the Ministry of Water. There is money that's going to the Ministry of Water, 6.25 billion shillings to increase the water grid capacity in Hoima. Then there is another 6.4 billion that's going to be invested in ICT. This is the fiber because CAF, after getting over 2 billion impressions online for the recent AFCON in Morocco, they want ICT facilities at the stadium and at the hotels in the areas where fans will be staying to be much higher. So they want an investment in the ICT of these areas. So that's what 6.4. Then there's 4.69 billion shillings that goes to the electricity lines. What government wants to do is to build dedicated electricity lines to the competition venues. That is Nambole and Hoima City Stadium. The kind that are not switched off. The kind that will not embarrass Uganda.
I still think we need that generator somewhere, somehow.
And I was going to say that too, that they want to build a dedicated line, the kind that I imagine Plot 1 in Tebe has.
And Mulago isn't even on that line.
It wasn't. I know some not very good stories when electricity has gone off.
I've been there and there was no power, and I was shocked.
And power has gone off, yeah? So maybe the one that serves the military barracks, that kind of power line, but the one that I'm very sure, the one that serves Plot 1 in Tebe. The government is saying they want to invest, they've dedicated 4.69 billion to build electricity lines in those areas. But I would insist, just like we've run the Chan, like I know during the Chan, Nambole bought 2 generators on the eve of the tournament.
And those generators still there?
They should be.
Yes, can't we use them?
We bought 2. I cannot speak with authority about whether they are there or not. But I know that on the eve of the tournament, when they're supposed to do the pre-tournament press conference, power went off. And CAF were very bitter. They tell the LOC and local organizing committee. And by the next day in the morning, there were 2 big generators.
That can be embarrassing also.
At Nambole. So, and I also know that even for the clubs that host games at night, I'm very much aware of St. Mary's Chitende and the MTN Omondi Stadium in Logogwe where KCC play their games. Vipers and KCC entirely run their games on generator. They have not taken chances on power going off. Then finally, there is 3.39 billion shillings that is going to be invested in meteorological services at the airports. That is in Kabalega and in Entebbe. There's going to be a revamp because they are going to be handling a lot more flights than they do. So there's going to be a revamp of that. And finally, there was a confirmation of the dates for the AFCON. That the tournament will run from June 19th to July 18th, which I found a bit shabby in terms of an announcement, because the tournament being hosted by 3 countries, I would imagine Kenya, Uganda, and Tanzania would come together to make this announcement, or CAF would make it. So Uganda actually launched what would be a preemptive strike in confirming when the tournament will be without the input of Kenya and Tanzania. But that is part of the information that Dennis was giving when he came to the media center. And hopefully, this money is money well spent. Knowing precedents when there's been big money allocated in this country, and perhaps the biggest story I remember is the one of Chogam 2007. Frank Baine, who is the spokesperson of Ministry of Prison Service, Uganda Prison Service, I think should be ready to receive some people. Because when such big money is allocated, there's going to be some small fish who want to act like big fish. And that normally never ends well.
Yeah.
So when I was looking at the figures, well, I was very excited. I've been very excited about... For 1 year,
I'm seeing inflation.
900 billion shillings. When I looked at the figures, I was thinking, okay, one, many of us who have worked in the sports industry have always complained about the low levels of investment. And we should be very pleased, like right now, government is dedicating this kind of money. I remember telling you of that NRM caucus meeting where sports for once was placed alongside peace and security in terms of priorities of government. Because if you've lived as long as I am, for the past 40 years, the biggest allocation in this country and what is told to be the most important by the president is peace and security. So I was mightily pleased that finally we have sport being spoken about in the same sentence as peace and security. But because these allocations are much higher than we've known, I was also think about the absorption capacity of these sectors in a very short period of time. And when the absorption capacity is not there some of the time, what normally happens is theft of public funds. That's why I've said Frank Baine buy new mattresses.
You know, when you're talking about the money that was going to communication, there were dollar signs in my eyes because I was thinking that's what we do here on Second Take with IDK. And I was thinking, okay, influencers, what, you know.
Yeah, they need to hire those.
They
the
need
social
to hire
media
us.
Band.
Don't say they need to hire those. Say they need to hire us.
Okay, they need to hire Second Take with IDK. First of all, not because of the knowledge, but I'm one of those who has insisted that it's Uganda hosting this tournament. But in the end, when the tournament is done, everyone will remember Uganda hosted the tournament. And it won't matter who did. So, Dennis, an opportunity. Second Take with IDK is here to help you push the tournament and all the other people, everywhere they might be, for the good of Uganda, because in the end, not only Second Take will take you where you want to go. Yeah, but there's many platforms. As part of that marketing budget, we should be. We should be.
Well, let's move on to talk about the Champions League. We spoke at the beginning of this week, actually, about onslaught, and I just want to know it has gone from bad to worse. No shot on target yesterday.
Yeah, the manner in which they set up to play.
5 in defense or something.
Yeah, they set up with a back five, a 5-3-2. A back three of Virgil van Dijk, Konati, and Joe Gomez, and then the wing backs in Jeremy Frimpong and Milos Kakes, and then the 3 midfielders and the 2 forwards. They were actually taken to the cleaners. They were as bad as I've seen Liverpool show up for a game in a very long time. Very negative, short on confidence. However, I had a bigger fear that had they opened up, then the scoreline could have been bad. Onslaught would not have been coached today. If they had opened up, I think there was a chance to concede 5. But while you might think that that is as bad as it could get, it could have been worse. Because it was only 2-0, those goals from Desridu and Kivicha Kvarashilia, after PSG missed an avalanche of chances. They should have been out of sight by halftime and could have scored even many more after the break. In the end, they were just not efficient. Had they been, Liverpool would have taken a hiding from that game. But luckily, it's 2-0 and they will believe they are still in the game. Even if I think they are not, I think they are out. I think they are going to lose home and away. That's how bad it's become. Yeah. But the team looks now devoid of confidence. And when Virgil van Dijk said the things he said at the weekend for that game against Man City, when he said that the team gave up at some point during the game, I don't think here they gave up, but there was no conviction at all. They never felt at kickoff that they could go to Paris and not only get a goal, but also win the game. There was no chance. But you've also got to give PSG their flowers. I thought they were excellent. There were doubts earlier in the season because of injuries and fatigue. But I think they've found their mojo again. If you look at that game against Chelsea and this one, they are playing every bit like the European champions we know. And that is down part of it to the fitness of some of their players. Dembele has struggled with injuries this season. Desridu has taken the mantle. Kivicha Kvarashilia was not playing as well as he is playing currently in the first part of the season. So there is so many things that have changed with the PSG side, but onslaught has just gone and taken everything about the spirit, about the fight, about the grit, about the pride of Liverpool in a very, very short period of time. And it's very scary to imagine that it can actually get worse.
Yeah.
Because if they open up next week, then what could happen? If they were this conservative, but still PSG created as many chances as they did. With a back 5, still PSG found a lot of space behind the wall. And Liverpool's best player was Mamardashvili, their goalkeeper. So if they open up, it could actually turn out worse. So as bad a performance as Liverpool have been able to put together, and perhaps one of PSG's best performances in the Champions League this season.
Okay. Well, Barcelona unlucky yesterday.
Fairly unlucky. They were more competitive than the scoreline speaks.
Yeah.
When Atletico won 2-0 at the Camp Nou. But also, I would start for me with Atletico on the other side. They don't win at the Camp Nou. This was the first victory for Diego Simeone away from home, away from
Did the red card
away
help?
at Camp Nou. And for a coach who has stayed in the job very long and who has won 2 league titles, I thought that was a mind-boggling statistic.
Yeah.
That is, this is only the second time he's gone to win a game at
Camp Nou.
at Barcelona. But I thought they were very good for the result. And I'm one of those people who is a big fan of free kicks. So when Julian Alvarez scored, not only that he's Argentine, and I support Argentina at midday and at midnight, it's one of those tricks in football that had died over the past few years, but I think players have refound their mojo and they are barring some free kicks. I thought that was brilliant. If Juan Garcia goes and takes that out, then he probably hits his head on the crossbar. So the placement of that, and from that incident also they had that red card. Paul Kubasi sent off for tackling when he was the last man in that defense. Okay, that took the wind out of Barcelona's sails, but I thought they were very competitive even after they had a man sent off. They were right in there. Lewandowski, Marcus Rashford had a goal, and then Lamine Yamal, but then they were hit with a sucker punch, because normally when you're up 1, like Atletico 1, the other team has a man sent off, all you have to do is buy your time. The space will show up, and eventually Alexander Soloth getting the second to confirm that Atletico will go into that second leg with a 2-0 lead. The game far from done. I also saw the coach, Hansi Flick, was very angry about one of the decisions. I think he believes they should have had a penalty for a handball in the box that wasn't given. Perhaps something that he might share with PSG, because there's an incident, I think, involving Ibrahima Konate on the other side that many people felt should have been a penalty, and Konate was very lucky. But in the end, I felt Atletico just did enough to win the game. And that's what you have to do when you're playing Barcelona in Europe.
Okay, we'll go and talk about the other games that were played the day before, but let me start by reading some messages here. They are mainly from referring to the show. You said there's someone here who is not too happy, Tushabe. He says, well, he loves the show. Thank you very much, Tushabe. He says, Nae Isma, no one is tall enough to see or know what will happen tomorrow. The confidence with which you say Arsenal can't have a double is so surprising. How about you give the analysis and leave that part out? We have Mutebi Musa, who says the issue is with Arteta having a weak link. It's hurting the team. We have Kasaga Gerald, who says, thanks for the show, IDK and Mabel. Arteta has had all these years to prove himself by winning trophies, a measure which shows how great coaches are, at least in his opinion. But the man seems too afraid to take risks when it matters most. I won't be shocked if he bottles the remaining 2 trophies. And then lastly, we have Koban Matthew, who says Arteta has to win the league. That's the only job he has. 0 Sporting, Arsenal 1.
Let's go by Kai Havertz. But I'm really itching to respond to that gentleman. For one reason, if you're an analyst and you don't have convictions for which you can give good reason, then you're better off being a news anchor.
You just read the news.
You just read the news. I come here and say, Arsenal beat Sporting Lisbon by a goal to nil. The goal scored by Kai Havertz. David Raya had a great game. Then we go to the next. Liverpool were beaten 2-0. Desiree Doe and Kvaratskhelia scored the goals. There's a second leg next week. 10-man Barcelona were beaten 2-0 by Atletico Madrid. I think analysts must have strong convictions. And I also request you to go back. There's a show we did whose title has the word quadruple. Go to that show. I think I labored to give reasons, and if you listen to those reasons and you're not just being a fan, and I find fans very fickle and blind, is that by the end of that show, you would have known that there was never a chance of a quadruple. Yeah? And I have to insist, I think Arsenal is a very good team. However, teams that win 2-3 titles are great teams. And I don't think this Arsenal is a great team.
So we're just looking at the Premier League.
It's a good team.
That's the only job.
Good teams are able to go with the trophy.
Okay.
And Arsenal should comfortably win the league. I said that before kickoff in August.
Okay.
I think they should win the league. Now they've taken a significant step. They should knock out Sporting. I thought Sporting missed their chance. They had chances in that game, kept out by David Raya. But in the end, when you're Sporting Lisbon, I wasn't too pleased by the manner in which they conceded that goal. Deep into added time, a ball is played through the heart of the defense between the two centre-backs. I'm imagining if I'm a Sporting Lisbon coach, what am I thinking in that minute? We have a 0-0 against a much superior opponent like Arsenal. So I want to preserve that and keep the game in a draw, which I have a fighting chance at the Emirates. I'm not pleased that a pass is played right down the middle of that Sporting Lisbon defense that late in the game, when they should be more compact and have numbers behind the ball. Then Kai Havertz has all the time to take a touch and finish with aplomb like he did. I do not agree with that. However, you've also got to give it to Arsenal that they've been in a bit of a rut.
Yeah.
After those two games, the one against Man City in the Carabao Cup and the one against Southampton. There was always talk about doubts developing. When you lose 2 games in a row and you're in their position, you might slide from the summit and land into a valley. So they had to find some kind of response. And I thought they were very solid. That response was led by David Raya, who had one of his best games, and the conversation about him being the best goalkeeper or starting in that goal for Spain at the World Cup will grow even louder. In the end, they kept themselves in the game. And then eventually, when they put in the shot up for Kai Havertz to score, he picked his spot and buried that, like he did in the previous round, because he also scored that away goal when they drew at Bayer Leverkusen, his former club. So very important results. They can look forward to the game against Bournemouth, which is, for me, the most important game of Arsenal's season. Win that. And then they should have enough in the tank to knock out Sporting Lisbon in the next week.
In the next week, yeah. Let's talk about Bayern Munich. First of all, Vincent Kompany, I think he has achieved something great, especially for a young coach, to come and be given such a big club. I was listening to this gentleman. He used to play for Tottenham. He's Black British. I don't know. I hope that's politically correct to say. What's his name? And he was saying how he's okay to start at the bottom. I think he's been given a what's below Champions League? Championship in the UK.
Yeah, he was at Burnley.
Tottenham. You know him? What's his name?
Ledley King?
No, not Ledley King. He's sometimes an analyst on
Jermaine Defoe?
Jermaine Defoe.
Okay. Yeah.
And he's so happy and proud to start from where he's starting from. But, Vincent Kompany comes in and he has had some results to show. And they beat, though we can't rule out Real. What did he get right?
And I understand where, for example, Jermaine Defoe is coming from. Black coaches don't get many opportunities at the top. I've seen an interview of Emil Heskey over the recent past saying as much the same. There are not many at the top coaching. So Vincent Kompany is representing an entire movement, not just himself, in that job. They were very good for the results. However, it also emphasizes the value of having a good coach. I just mentioned David Raya, rather a good goalkeeper. The difference between Real Madrid and Bayern Munich on the day, I felt, was Manuel Neuer. Even at 40, and he's had an injury-ravaged past 2-3 years, for him to come back and pull off the number of saves that he did in a game that was very enjoyable to watch for the neutral, but not enjoyable for the people who believe in structure and systems, because it was very open, very many chances. For either side. The difference on this side, they had Manuel Neuer, and then on the other side, Bayern Munich were not very efficient. They could have left Madrid, the Spanish capital, with a bigger margin of victory. but were very wasteful in front of goal. But should be pleased to, not many teams go to the Bernabeu and win 2-1 in the Champions League, and then you start to think you may not be able to deliver the ultimate result to make it to the next stage of the Champions League. Maybe if Thibaut Courtois was in goal, maybe it's a totally different ball game. But at this point, Bayern, for me, have the better team in terms of balance. And I'd stated that because I think if you look at the balance of Real Madrid, I think it's been a bit of a challenge. And for that game, I'd made a very loud appeal for Alvaro Bello and not to play that youngster who has done very well from the academy. I think it's called Picha, who has been playing in that midfield alongside Aurelien Tchouameni, because you have a big game player like Jude Bellingham. I felt Jude Bellingham should have been on the pitch, and for the minutes that Bellingham got in that day, I thought was very, very good value. So maybe there's going to be those kind of changes over the next week or so. And the only reason why this game is still in the balance is because it's Real Madrid. If any team had lost to Bayern 2-1 in the Champions League and Bayern had won that game away from home, it is almost unthinkable that they would come back. Yeah. It's only as Real Madrid, the most successful team, the most successful team in the Champions League. And like you say, have something about this competition that even when they do not play very well, they'll show up with that big moment when they need it. And that's the only reason that Real Madrid are in this. But I'm not one of those who's convinced that they'll find the balance right for the next week. And if they don't, they still goes in that Bayern Munich side. Yeah. Harry Kane should have a bit more. The goal that he scored was just a confirmation of how good a striker is. And they'll probably bury more of the chances they miss at the Bernabeu when they play in that second leg. Okay.
So now talking about the English Premier League, you've mentioned briefly about Arsenal and Bournemouth. Bournemouth have this teenager who I think, not that he would rival Max Dawson because Max is still very young, but Junior Krupi, is it? Or
Krupi, yeah?
Yeah.
One of our friends, Nicolas Lumala. You guys confuse me, the two of you. Nicolas Lumala is a big fan of the kid. He's a big fan. He's an Arsenal.
One to watch.
He's an Arsenal fan, but he's also a big fan of Krupi. He sent me a message when he saw some of the things he was doing.
Yeah.
Is that all? I think I've argued and I'll insist this is the most important game of Arsenal's season. If they do not win, and they have the opportunity to play more than 24 hours before Chelsea walk out, rather before Man City walk out against Chelsea on Sunday, because they play the early kickoff on Saturday, the Arsenal, they've got to win and got off clear. If they do not, and then Man City have an opportunity to trim that gap, and we all know they still have a game in hand, and they have a chance to play Arsenal at the Etihad, Arsenal will be in big trouble. So for me, it's not a game where you can sit down and discuss the tactical setup and all these things that might come up. It's a game that Arsenal have to win.
Okay.
There is no other way to look at it. Bournemouth have improved greatly from the first part of the season. They struggled earlier in the year. They've lost so many players. Milos Kakes is gone. Ivan Zamban is at PSG. And many other players who have left over the past few years. And Dean Houston left also for Real Madrid. They've had to change their team quite a bit. And they've struggled in that area defensively. And then they've had injuries. For example, the kid, Justin Kluivert, I would call him a kid because I watched his father, Patrick Kluivert, has had so many injuries this season, has not been in the kind of form. But for everything that Bournemouth will offer, Arsenal have to win. Actually, perhaps this is the game where Arsenal need that place to be rocking. The decibels have to be compared to what Anfield can generate, to what previously Everton could generate at Goodison Park. Because those two are known as the stadiums that are known to generate the kind of noise and backing for their teams that is admirable for the rest of Europe. So Arsenal have to show up, the fans have to show up for it. and then the team has put in the performance. Regardless of what 11 Arteta picks, they have to win this game.
Okay. You talked about City and Chelsea. Guess who will be watching that game keenly? One Enzo Maresca.
Yeah.
I've read that this morning, actually, that he is being considered, or he has had a meeting with City. Can you imagine? The former Chelsea, he has been on the beach, apparently. But yeah, City may be considering him after Pep leaves. But anyway, we have seen...
He's a former Pep Guardiola assistant. He was
Yeah.
an assistant for Pep before he left and went to Leicester. And there's always been conversation that Pep actually backs him to take over from him at Man City. But you could go on.
Yeah. No, so anyway, we have seen a resurgence of City. I'm sure they're going to go into this game with a lot of confidence. Chelsea, on the other hand, scored 7. But against Port Vale, I know you said, you know. But
the bottom side of League 2. League 1, rather.
What should we expect?
Attack against defense. Chelsea's best chance for me is to sit in a low block and hit City on the break, which is something that Chelsea have been good at under previous manager. Liam Rosini has not shown any of that yet for us to point that they could actually sit in a very low block and maintain their shape and then eventually catch Man City through the pace of Garnacho or Pedro Neto, all the other forwards, all the wide players that could come in handy. But like I said about Arsenal, maybe City just have to go there and win. But they've hit some kind of purple patch again right at the end of the season. That's why we're even having this conversation, thinking that the title race is not done.
Yeah.
Because City have shown us that they're in the kind of form, the manner in which they beat Arsenal and then eventually took Liverpool to the cleaners in the FA Cup. And all of a sudden, many of them are fit again because they've had their injury problems, especially in defense, like we've known with Gvardiol and John Stones for most of the season. But the bulk of their first team is playing well. And then Ryan Cherki has come into his element. Erling Haaland scored a hat-trick the previous week. And then, more importantly, also, I think Pep Guardiola returns to the bench. He's missed the last 2 when he was suspended because of an accumulation of yellow cards. So it's a game where it entirely looks like 3 points for City, considering that Chelsea do not defend, and it's been the challenge. Then their goalkeepers are susceptible to mistakes. There isn't, maybe they go on attack and get some kind of result, positive result from the other side of the pitch, but will that be sufficient? For example, if they scored 2, would they be able to keep out City thrice? Very, very hard with the way Chelsea have defended this season, with the exception of that game against Port Vale, which is a League One team and may count for nothing in the end. So should be an interesting one. Even when Chelsea have been bad in recent years, they tend to show up for City games. For me, that is the other only positive. Chelsea might show up for this one.
Okay.
They've found a habit of that.
Let's talk about the others that are pushing for a top 5 finish. Villa, United.
Of those, United do not play until Monday night, home to Leeds, a relegation threatened side. Leeds fans are always seeing that there is only one United, so they don't believe Manchester is United. So that's on the other side of the banter, but a huge rivalry going back very many years, very, very many years. Could be interesting depending on how well Leeds defend. And if they get that high ball into the box, then Dominic Calvert-Lewin has an influence. Villa should be aware at Nottingham Forest. I think they are back winning games. They won their previous league game and they are going well in the Europa League. They should have an opportunity to get in the latter stages, at least until, for me, they should get to the final of the Europa League. That's one thing that Unai Emery, I think, gives you with the cup football.
Yeah.
But after they had gone through a very difficult spell, they should get back on their winning ways again. And a game away at Nottingham Forest, who are still fighting for their lives, should be an interesting one. Vitor Pereira got the team to win again for the first time in that game away at Tottenham Hotspur in the previous one. So should be another one. Then finally, there is that 8:30 p.m. game at Anfield, Liverpool against Fulham, where a lot of the conversation for me will be around Mohamed Salah. wasn't selected even when Liverpool played as many as 16 players in that game away in Paris. So I think he walks back straight into for this one, for the one against Fulham. But if they still have designs of getting into the top 5, they've got to win this one. They've got to beat Fulham because they have a tougher run in if you compare with Villa, United, and Chelsea. They actually have to play all the 3 in their final 7 games. They have to play Villa, they have to play United, they have to play Chelsea. So while you might lose in some of those, you've got to take care of the results you're expected to pick. So for a Liverpool team that has been very, very, and to use the word inconsistent is just to be economic with language. For a Liverpool team that has been very bad for most of the season. Because when you say inconsistent, it's almost saying that they've been good on some days and bad on others. But they've been bad most of the season. So you cannot use the word inconsistent. And they've won only one of their previous 6 games. That was against Galatasaray. So Ancelotti has to find something. And maybe the fans have to back their side at this point. Maybe those are they are the most important ingredient of what Liverpool are going to deliver. And if they do not get a result against Fulham, they will then be counting on the fact that Chelsea have also been very bad because the two sides are only going to stumble over the line in that push for the top 4 place, or rather top 5 place. I don't think they are going to go on a run that will knock Man United and Villa out of those top positions. But because Chelsea have been as bad as Liverpool, then between them, one of them has to be worse for the other to get into the Champions League, which is very critical for the lifeblood of both sides in terms of revenues for next year.
Yeah, definitely. And now talking about Serie A in Italy, we have Inter. Have they sealed their place on the top? They play Como, Cesc Fabregas's high-flying Como.
Yeah, pushing for the Champions League.
Young Premier League old boy who is...
And if he knew me, I'd be very glad. I love that boy. I'm a big,
he seemed
big
humble
fan.
when he was
I'm a big fan.
I think Arsenal and Chelsea.
I've already said there's 3 players in football whose careers I can narrate in a manner in which you used to narrate movies in lower secondary school and primary school.
Cesc Fabregas.
Fabregas is one. The other is Wayne Rooney. The other is Lionel Messi. I watched them start. And I watched them finish. Yeah. Finish their career. Okay, one is still playing. Messi still thinks we can win the World Cup later on this year. But whenever I see Fabregas, I always make a reference. In 2003, I had a lot of time on my hands. I was watching the Under-17 FIFA World Cup. I watched the entire tournament. The best player in that tournament by a country and ocean mile was Cesc Fabregas. By then he had a lot of hair and was wearing, on his name, there was Francesc. That was the name on his shirt. And I've never forgotten. So thereafter, by the time he walked out for the Arsenal, I was actually telling my friends, I watched that kid, and the world will talk about him. So eventually, he goes and has a splendid career. He actually played the pass at one Spain the World Cup. That's how much I love the boy, that I can even pick out something as tiny as that. Because if Iniesta picks the ball and plays it to Fabregas, he holds it and plays it back to Iniesta to score that goal that beat Netherlands in extra time back in 2010 for Spain to win the World Cup. So that's Fabregas. He's transitioned into a very good coach. The other is Wayne Rooney, who I watched start all those many years ago. And then, before Messi was anything that all of us know, there used to be a program called FIFA Football Mundial that was on WBS. So they used to do a segment that is called Next Gen. So they showed a 13-year-old boy slicing through his age mates at the time. And that boy was Messi. So eventually, by the time he showed up, I'd warned a few of my friends with whom we've spent a large part of our lives, that I've seen a kid who, at the time I said, is going to be the greatest player. And this is before he played the first game for Barcelona. So there are those I can relate to. That's why I take a lot of pride. These days, I always think if there's a coach I want to succeed, I cannot imagine anyone any more than I imagine Fabregas doing well. But this weekend, he could go a long way in taking Inter Milan closer to a title if his Como do not show up for that game. He's done very well, picked some very important results, beaten Juventus this season. But after that 5-2 result earlier in the week for Inter Milan against Roma, I think they sent out a very loud message. And they had an opportunity to stretch that gap, which they did, because the teams that are chasing them, Napoli and Milan, were playing against each other. And Napoli beat AC Milan by 1-0. That goal, I think, scored by Politano off the right wing. That gave Inter Milan an opportunity to widen that gap. So it hasn't widened aside because Napoli are second. But if they have hopes of that changing, then they've got to bank on Fabregas to get the result. The difference for this phase of the season that Inter Milan have is that their most important player is back. Lautaro Martinez got back and scored twice in that game against Roma. And if it goes in this kind of form, then he gets a goal here and maybe 2-3 more, and Inter Milan will be champions before the final of the season. So it's a very critical one. Como will test Inter. Okay. I think they've been that good to test Inter, especially through that Argentine number 10, Nicolas Paz, who has been the talk of the Serie A as one of the best old school playmakers in that hole behind the main striker. If Paz plays well, and he has to play well, where I think Inter Milan will not let him, then Como will be very, very competitive.
Okay, Parma vs Napoli?
Napoli on quite a streak. They've won 5 in a row. If they win here, that will be 6 in a row. If they have designs on winning the league, I think they should go to Parma and win. They should go to Parma and win at this stage of the season.
Okay, and then Milan?
They play Udinese. Yeah, should be 3 points for Milan. That result was a setback against Napoli. And they were never going to win the league, but they need to get back. They need to stay in Europe for another season as they sort out a bit of their finances and all. They should comfortably get a result against Udinese.
Okay, and now to Spain, the Catalan derby this weekend.
One that always goes one way when Barcelona do play against Espanyol. And I would expect Hansi Flick to make rotations and rest some of his players. He has a huge one next week at the Wanda Metropolitano. And they're trailing 2-0 to Atletico Madrid. So they make changes there against Espanyol. And that should not affect them much. They should get the 3 points. And by the time they'll play, they will have known the result of the team that is chasing them, Real Madrid. Because Real Madrid play early on Saturday against Girona. And should Real Madrid win, depending on what kind of balance Arbeloa finds or what kind of motivation, because one of the challenges I've seen with Madrid in some of these smaller games is that the players can look very disinterested. I thought against Mallorca, they were only switching on and off during the game. They were not locked in from kickoff to the end. And now that they're 7 points adrift, and they have an opportunity to play early and win and then reduce us to 4 before Barcelona walk out for Espanyol. Madrid have to do themselves a bit of justice and just win the game and pile a bit of pressure on Barcelona.
Okay. Now, let's talk about the French league. You did explain a little bit, I think 2 weeks ago, a show we did last week, about the French league, professional football league, favoring PSG. So they have a break this weekend. Are they fair? Is that a good thing? Because they're I don't know if they're prioritizing. They are prioritizing the Champions League against the domestic league. Does the domestic
against the Farmers League?
Does it stand to suffer? Are they doing something good? What would you do if you were in their position? No one else in Europe is doing it.
I am on both sides.
Okay.
And it's never a good thing.
Yes.
It's never a good thing. What most leagues have done over the past 20 years or so is to allow their Champions League teams play on a Friday and have the weekend off before they walk out on a Tuesday, Wednesday in the next week. What is happening in France for me is unprecedented. Okay, they've taken a lot of abuse and banter from when PSG became rich for being one of the two farmers leagues. The other is the Bundesliga. Because PSG would walk out with blindfolds and win the league. they've taken it personal and tried as a country to aid PSG's run in Europe. And extra days off is one of those things that they could do. And that's why they're not playing this weekend. They would have played Lons, RC Lons, which is the team that is pursuing them. Okay, they are now 4 points adrift after losing that derby to Lille last week by 3-0. But they are the closest to them. And Lons do not agree with the decision. That says a lot about maybe the feeling of some of the rivals. It's very unfair, I think. I don't know where the limits of UEFA come in, because I don't think UEFA has a jurisdiction over the local competitions, because clearly this is an advantage for PSG against Liverpool, who are going to be playing a game on Saturday night before they walk out on Tuesday, while PSG over the 7 days will have only played Liverpool and Liverpool. So it's a bit unfair, but it's also something that Jose Mourinho, when he first walked into England back in 2004, something that he said.
The special one.
Yeah, the special one actually did say that he felt the Premier League should help their teams a bit more with their scheduling of the league to help them advance in Europe, because he wanted at the time Chelsea to play their games on Friday night. Every time they would have a game in the Champions League the following week. And the Premier League has refused, and he said because they have their traditions, they have their lunchtime kickoff, they have their late kickoff, they have their Sunday evening game. And I don't know societies that are sown in tradition like the British. If you have to compare with so many of our societies, I think for them tradition comes first. And that is where the English teams will not get the kind of advantage, because in other places, Bayern have also had the opportunity to play on Friday. Even in Spain, sometimes they've had the opportunity. Talk of Porto, Benfica, and Sporting Lisbon. In Europe, they've had chances to play on Friday when they have a game in the Champions League the next week. But none has had games called off because they're in the Champions League. So it's very, very unfair on the rest of Europe. But if you have your baby, there aren't limits on how much you can love them. Because there's always this blame game that omwana omukuzize ekyejo. I've never known where there's a limit on how a parent should take care of their child and give them the love that they believe is what all they got. So in this case, while it's unfair on the rest of Europe, you cannot blame the French for looking after their own baby.
Okay, speaking of babies, our under-17 have done well.
Yeah, this week they got to learn the draw for the AFCON, because they will be playing at the AFCON. I need to just read that out, because it's not one that requires a lot of analysis at this stage, since the tournament is still some weeks away. They've been drawn in a very, very, very tough group at the AFCON, which will be played on May 13th to June 2nd in Morocco. The draw was conducted in Cairo, in Egypt, at the CAF headquarters. So they are in Group B against Cote d'Ivoire, who have won this tournament before, against Cameroon and DR Congo. That's what the under-17 is going to bring them. The under-17 AFCON will bring them. Of course, the teams that have qualified. Group A has Morocco, Tunisia, Egypt, and Ethiopia. I mentioned Group B. Group C has Mali, Angola, Tanzania, and Mozambique. Group T has Senegal, South Africa, Algeria, and Ghana. What they are looking for is the top 8 teams will go straight. The top 8, which is the top 2 from each group, will go straight into the next round. Then the other teams, the teams that finish third, will contest for the remaining 2 slots. Because Africa has 10 slots at the Under-17 World Cup. Yeah. And our previous generation has qualified for that. Remember the joy that the James Borgeres brought to this country, including that result when they beat France at the World Cup. So this next generation that is now coached by Larrea Kingston, the Ghanaian, and assisted by Stephen Beng and Saddam Juma, have an opportunity. If they get into the top 10 at the AFCON in Morocco, then they qualify for the World Cup, which will also be played in Qatar like the previous one. Qatar is hosting the next 5. FIFA chose to have the Under-17 World Cup played on an annual basis to give players from these countries an opportunity to compete against players from the top, from France, Germany, England, Spain, Brazil, on a regular basis. And I think over time that will bridge the gap in terms of competitiveness and technical ability. So the team has been training over the recent past, but now they are into the final stretch. Now you'll know who you're going to play. It's Cameroon, it's Cote d'Ivoire, it's DRC.
Well, let's hope they'll be able to get some results from those countries. And speaking of getting results, did you think Express had it in them to beat Police?
Never a chance, never a chance. In their previous game, they had just come off that Uganda Cup hammering by Kitara in Hoima, the one they conceded 3 goals and lost 3-0. I thought they did not have an opportunity to... They did not have a chance against Police, who have been high-flying, but just more shockingly, Express came from a goal down. There's a goalkeeping howl. I thought the Police goalkeeper was very, very poor. Was very, very poor on the Edward Kasibante. That's his name. That's what I was looking for. When he gifted Sharif Lubega a goal, long ball, and then he comes out, he's in no man's land, he catches the ball, he can't catch it, goes over his head. And that was 1-1, then became 2-1, and then Express got a third. So, very good result. There's been a lot of animosity between the Express fans and their team because many do not agree with the decision that moved the club from Wankurukuku to Ham Stadium in Nachivubo, where they play their games under the lights, and there's been a boycott, a very loud boycott of Express games by the bulk of their fans. There's been a mending of fences over the last few weeks, and now fans have trickled back into the stadium to watch Express play, which should be a very positive sign for the club. But this result, I would never have felt that they are going to get a result against Police, but they did 3-1.
Okay, Kitara, Vipers host Kitara.
Yeah, biggest game, I think, in the league this week. A potential title decider. There's 4 points between them. And what you'd call a growing rivalry. Remember, one, there was the fight over the new format. Kitara backed it and Vipers did not. Kitara showed up for that game at Nambole, Vipers did not. And eventually, those points were awarded to Kitara. And now Vipers have felt aggrieved since. But there's also something I like about the rivalry, which is my second point. I think 2 seasons ago, or the season before last, Kitara came to play a game at Chitende, and their fans had carried these drums. They had paid their tickets, they had drums, and they were told they could not get the drums inside the stadium. Despite interventions and negotiations, of course, we all know there's one person who makes the decisions.
Mr.
And
President.
and the final decision from above
he doesn't interfere, he intervenes.
He intervenes. So when he intervened, the Vipers president, Kitara, were told they could not get their drums in, and they did not. And they felt very aggrieved. I remember meeting them at the gate, and some of them, because they recognized me, were saying, "Is this what your Kampala teams do?" Because they had several coasters that traveled for that game. I would expect the same. Because should they win at Chitende, then they cut that gap to 3, and they'll be the first team to beat Vipers on the pitch this season. Because they're unbeaten on the pitch, but they've lost a game in the boardroom. That game against Kitara at Nambole. So, should be an interesting one. The one guarantee you have with Waswabosa, any Waswabosa coach team, and is in charge at Kitara, is that you'll see grit, you'll see competitiveness, you'll see a fair balance between attack and defense. When they need to go out and attack, they'll do it, and when they need to defend, they'll be there in numbers. These teams work very hard. But he's walking into a Vipers team, like I've stated already, I've not lost a game in the league. Rarely lose games at Chitende.
At home, yeah.
They rarely lose games at Chitende. And I've found something extra ever since Alan Okello walked away from the club and joined Yanga. And that is exemplified by the form of Karim Watambala and Osama Arafat as the 2 main threats in attack. So that place will be bouncing. I think it's a very, very good place to be. When they talk about title decider, sometimes that word is used loosely and never really represents what actually the game means. This is a proper title decider. I think if Vipers win and go 7 points clear of Kitara, they will have created a significant enough gap for them to go on and win the league again, which will be their 7th title, I think, in the past 8 or 9 years. And that is a testament of a team that has dominated the league in the recent past. Okay.
You talk about grit and competitiveness. Is that something you will not see in Villa versus KCCA?
Both teams should be desperate. Yes, Villa are still in the cup competition, so they still have a chance to win the league. But KCCA's title challenge could fall this week. Should they go to Kadiba and lose, then we can kiss KCCA's chances of winning anything this season goodbye. And here is why. I want to open the league table. At this point, Vipers are top. They have 50 points. Kitara second on 46. KCCA third on 45. Villa fourth on 41. So if Vipers were to win and they play earlier, they play on Friday, then Villa KCCA is on Saturday. If Vipers were to win their game, they'll move as many as 8 points ahead of KCCA. If KCCA were to lose, the margin writes itself. So there's been a bit of pressure, I think, on the KCCA co-coaches, Brian Senyon and Jackson Mageda, for most of the season, but they had hit a purple patch over the recent past and they are winning games consistently, so that noise has quietened a bit. But they play against a Villa side who, for many of us, have played relatively the best football in the league. They may not have the results to match yet because a relatively young team, the players Hassan Mubiru, and then, of course, the injury to Jonah Patrick Kakande, their best player and player of the season a few years ago, has not helped. And when he even got fit, did not walk straight back into the side. I think the coach wanted to show him a bit that this is not entirely his house. And that maybe gets him back to playing fairer than he has and putting in a lot more work. So should be an interesting one. But like you say, if Villa play as well and hunt the ball like they have, because they press high up the pitch, and one of the things they've liked in most of the games has been the directness. When Frank Sevoff does not start, they do not have the directness, and they love to cross the ball and get into wide areas. And that's something that will challenge KCCA a fair bit. For home side, Mayanja has to play one of his better games. I think he's been making that run from midfield, and is the one that has been bringing the extra, something extra to that KCCA side in a time when they've revived their fortunes in the league. But should be an interesting one under the lights at Kadiba. For both, any result that is not victory is fatal in terms of their title chances. Well aware they will know the result that Vipers will have picked against Kitara.
Yeah. Okay. Let's move on to rugby now. Pirates have a very worthy opponent with the Enterprise Cup.
Yeah, the only surviving side of the four that walked out in the Enterprise Cup, because Buffaloes, Cobs and Edens were knocked out. So on Saturday, Pirates have an opportunity to act as ambassadors. And actually this week I met one of their wingers, Roy Chizito. A few years ago, scored the most number of tries during the Safari Sevens. The first time he was selected for the National Sevens team. And I'm happy to report that he was in good health. So Pirates are carrying the burden of a nation in terms of rugby. They play that game on Saturday at Kings Park against Nondescripts. Initially, the game had been scheduled to happen at Wankurukuku, but I've also been made aware that Wankurukuku will be hosting a sports day for one of the schools, and they are paid in advance, and maybe they're even paying more money.
Yeah.
So the game has been moved to Kings Park. But what an opportunity for Pirates. When they won that game in the quarterfinals at Wankurukuku against KCB Rugby, I thought their defense was very critical in everything they did. I think they are going to need a bit of that. But they've also got to find room to attack, because Nondescripts are one of the older sides in Kenyan rugby and will be quite a test. So I'd love to see Isaac Masanganzira at the top of his game, defensive, because I think he's probably their best tackler in that side. Then you look at Moses Ziwa, but also in addition, when they get into attacking areas, Thomas Chisiga and William Munkore have got to be the top of their game, and Conrad Wanyama too. So should be a very big one for Pirates and for Ugandan rugby, because if they were to win, then they move into the final of that regional competition, where Uganda have shown that they are still perhaps behind some of those Kenyan sides in this competition.
Okay. Now, from rugby to volleyball, tell us what's happening there.
One, the women's final has finally had a game too, because they played a game one more than 10 days ago, and that was won by KCCA to go 1-0 up in what would be a 3-game series. But VVC got back and won game two, so that series is tied at 1-1. By the next time you watch this Second Take with IDK, you'll probably have a champion, because game 3 will be played this weekend. But the other case, there was supposed to be a final that could have been Nemo Stars against Sportes, because Nemo Stars won the game on the court. In the semifinals, won that series by 2-1 before Elion sought a decision in the UVF boardroom, if they have one. Eventually, that overturned that semifinal and declared Elion to have won that semifinal to go into the final against Sportes. That final should have started on Wednesday this week between Elion and Sportes, but Nemo Stars did file an appeal with the National Council of Sports, contesting the decision that was taken by Uganda Volleyball Federation. So NCS ruled, who are the overseers of sport in the country, ruled that the final should not happen before this case is heard. So it's gone that high. And these days, under the New Sports Act, NCS have that jurisdiction to rule on cases within federation. So we'll wait and see what happens with that. But it's taken too long.
Yeah.
And when you read the merits of the case, Nemo Stars were actually contesting the process and not the substance.
There was a player, you said, from...
Two players.
Yeah.
One came from South Sudan and played for Nemo Stars and does not have an international transfer certificate. And the other is being claimed by Bishop Stewart University Volleyball Club in Western Uganda to have been their player, yet he played for Nemo. But for me, the one who looks the ugliest, Nemo Stars may look ugly, very, very ugly. The one who looks the ugliest for me is UVF, Uganda Volleyball Federation. You're the ones who issue the clearances and sign on match forms. So how then do these teams field players who have not been cleared by you, the organizers of the league? I think leaves very bad egg on Uganda Volleyball Federation's faces.
Okay. Now for this segment of why should we care? Why should we care about, and we spoke about him recently, about Tyson Fury. He wants to play Anthony Joshua.
Yeah, he was giving an interview to the BBC that I had on 5 Live. I'm still that transition. I still listen to my 5 Live the way I listened to it all those many years ago when I first fell in love with sport. And I thought I needed to know a lot more sport than I did. And no better place I could find than 5 Live. So he gave an interview because he has a fight this week. He's going to be fighting against a fighter called Aslanbek Makhmudov. Aslanbek Makhmudov, as returns from retirement after 16 months away.
This is like the third retirement?
The third retirement that he's had.
Like an African.
But in that interview, and it's actually not his third, it's his 5th retirement in all. In that interview that he gave to BBC 5 Live, he stated that the target of walking out against Makhmudov this weekend is to ensure that he gives fans what they want before the end of the year, and that's a fight against Anthony Joshua. That's a fight that he wants to happen before the end of the year. Of course, Joshua's camp has not responded, but...
Has he played since the accident?
No, he hasn't. He hasn't. It's been a very difficult time for him. So Joshua actually last fought in December last year where he was fighting Jake Paul, and remember, he took out Jake Paul's jaw. Yeah, and Jake Paul posted that very cheeky thing when he was in hospital having treatment. So eventually, if it does happen, will probably be one of the richest fights, Tyson Fury against Anthony Joshua, because you're talking about two of the best heavyweight boxers of the British at a time when the British are making all the noise in heavyweight boxing. Yes, they've lost fights to, like the previous week, Deontay Wilder beat Derek Chisora. Alexander Usyk has beaten all these British fighters. But in terms of the ability to generate money, if eventually Tyson Fury gets his wish, and in that interview he said that if it happens, it does happen. If it doesn't, then he's not the one who's going to make a final decision. But what he wants is a fight to happen. And be very good for boxing if eventually...
I think it would. Actually, as you were talking, I remember back in the day, again, not to give my age away, but you would know there's Muhammad Ali, there's Evander Holyfield, there's Mike Tyson. And you know, okay, this year, this is the heavyweight champion.
Yeah.
Who would you say is the current heavyweight champion?
I would say Alexander Usyk. I think he's been the best boxer over the recent past.
Okay.
The Ukrainian is done very, very well. Very, very well. And I used to be one of those who used to decide, the Gypsy King, like he's called, Tyson Fury. And many years ago, I used to look at him and say, okay, this guy talks bigger game than he does play. Until one night I stayed out at a place called Big Mike's. For those who use that, what's it called? John Babiha Avenue. Yeah?
Former Acacia.
Yeah, former Acacia, call it whatever it is. One night I stayed out to watch Tyson Fury against Vladimir Klitschko. And after that night, I should have picked up the phone call and called 7 billion people in the world and told them, this guy is legitimate. Because for heavyweight, Tyson Fury has the skill set and the movement on his feet of a middleweight boxer. And that is not very easy to find because heavyweights are not very good with their feet. They can be good with their hands, but the skill set at that time, and that fight should have been in 2013. Yeah, when he beat Vladimir Klitschko, if I remember correctly, that many years ago. And from then on, I was a fan. I was skewed towards the Gypsy King. Of course, if you don't notice him, he'll come wearing a coat of many colors. He talks a big game. If you listen to his interviews, and sometimes if you're looking for stories and you're tabloid, the fights with his father too are very, very attractive. So he's one of those who, when he goes out to fight, I think it generates a lot of attention that many boxers wouldn't. And that's why eventually if he and Anthony Joshua choose to fight by end of this year, it will be very, very attractive, a prospect for anyone to ignore.
Okay. Well, that's all we had for you this week. Thank you for watching. Remember to hit the subscribe button if you haven't already. Share, like, comment. We love to hear from you. So till next week, have a great weekend and take care of yourself.
Are you tired of the daily hustle and bustle, the endless traffic just to get your little one to a good school? GMS Bingo offers a unique blend of academic excellence with a holistic child development in both nursery and primary. We provide a national curriculum with an international touch. Enroll your child today by visiting our campus along Trinity College Nabigo Road. GMS Bingo, where every child's potential is a reality. Because we care.